cruel and unusual punishment and violates the Eighth Amendment. This is according to a federal appeals court ruling on Friday. This ruling potentially paves the way for tens of thousands to regain their voting rights. A panel of Fifth Circuit judges ruled 2-1 in favor of the plaintiffs, writing that the section at issue in Mississippi's state constitution ensures that they will never be fully rehabilitated, continues to punish individuals beyond the term their culpability requires, and serves no protective function to society. Around the nation, state Republican Party apparatuses, once bastions of competency that help produce state House takeovers, have become shells of their former machines amid infighting, and a lack of organization. Current and former officials at the heart of the matter blame twin forces. They say the rise of insurgent pro-Donald Trump activists capturing party leadership posts, combined with the ever-rising influence of super PACs. Appearing on 5 television networks Sunday morning, a lawyer for former President Donald Trump argued that his actions in the effort to overturn the 2020 election fell short of crimes and were merely aspirational. The remarks from Trump's lawyer, John Laurel, came as Trump was blanketing his social media platform, Truth Social, with posts suggesting that his legal team was going to seek the recusal of Judge Tanya Chutkan, the federal judge overseeing the case, and try to move his trial out of Washington, D.C. Governor Ron DeSantis clearly stated in a new interview that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. Shouldn't be news, but it is, because many of the Republican candidates continue to assert the lie that the election was rigged and that Joe Biden is not the legitimate president. Now, Florida governor's statement diverges from the talking point of most Republican voters as the former president's struggling GOP rivals test out new lines of attack against him. Of course he lost, says DeSantis in an interview with NBC News. Joe Biden is the president. Now, DeSantis, who is polling well behind Trump for the presidential nomination, had acknowledged just over the weekend that the former president's false conspiracy theories about a rigged election were unsubstantiated. And a federal judge today dismissed a countersuit by former President Trump against E. Jean Carroll, the writer whom he was found liable for sexually abusing and defaming after a civil trial in Manhattan this year. In the ruling today, Judge Lewis Kaplan wrote that the jury's finding implicitly determined that Trump had forcibly penetrated Ms. Carroll with his fingers, which he said amounts to rape, as the term is commonly used outside the narrower legal definition that the jury was required to consider. And Florida and the College Board appear to have come to a resolution over the inclusion of LGBTQ topics in the state's advanced placement psychology classes. The resolve came a day after the education nonprofit said the state effectively banned the course due to its content on sexual orientation and gender identity. In a letter shared with school superintendents, the education commissioner said the department is not discouraging districts from teaching AP psychology. And new polling shows that national Republicans and Iowa Republican caucus goers are more interested in law and order than battling woke schools, media, and corporations. This doesn't portend well for Governor Ron DeSantis, who has banked his campaign for the GOP nomination for president on being the most anti-woke candidate. You are listening and watching Areva Martin in Real Time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. This is hour 2 of Areva Martin in Real Time, and in this hour, we go deep. We dig behind the headlines. We go underneath those headlines. We are tracking usually the biggest stories of the day, and some of those stories make big headlines. Others have big impact. Today, I'm going one-on-one with one of the nation's leading civil rights leaders. We're going to be talking about everything from the proposed ban on menthol by the Biden administration to the Black vote in 2024. As well as we're going to talk about Vice President Kamala Harris. She is having a moment, making her rounds to many of the nation's big conferences and conventions, including the NAACP conference, including a big conference of Delta Sigma Theta and others this summer. Also going to talk about this anti-blackness and where we are in this country today versus the summer following the murder of George Floyd. Has the pendulum swung in the opposite direction? Or, Black folks, is our moment over? Was that activism we saw after George Floyd's murder a moment rather than a movement? And what is up with the group that filed the lawsuit that led to the elimination of affirmative action in college admissions? They are now going after private companies, saying that DEI initiatives and programs are unconstitutional. We're going to talk to Dr. Benjamin Chavis, civil rights leader and president CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, about all of those topics and more when we come forward right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader. KBLA Talk 1580. Follow the leader.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at KBLA 1580.
Follow the leader.
Are you ready?
The station leading the way with exclusive interviews,
Follow the leader.
stimulating conversation, and intellectual discourse that empowers, enlightens, and informs.
Follow the leader.
Follow the leader at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Keep following the leader.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my. House shot with a rest spot. Shot with a rest spot. Shot with a rest spot.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
Bounce is back.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show, weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head. Yeah.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up. If you come across a radio frequency anywhere putting more variety and more diversity on the air than KBLA Talk 1580, we sure would like to hear about your discovery.
You got to have vision.
You can search, but we are confident that you won't find more shows covering more topics, hosted by a more diverse and inclusive lineup of talkers than the squad we have assembled here at KBLA Talk 1580.
This is the time, brothers. This is the time.
We've got something for everybody.
That's right.
Health and healing, history and humor, issues and events, empowerment and entertainment, all in one station.
What's really going on?
Free enterprise, you dig?
KBLA Talk 1580. Yes. Oh yeah. We got a lot to talk about.
King Kong ain't got on me.
If you're not listening to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings on KBLA Talk 1580, you're missing out. Everybody wants to talk to Tavis.
That's one reason, by the way, why I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. The three people I always most hoped would interview me were Phil Donahue, Studs Terkel, and Tavis Smiley. Donahue's retired, Terkel's deceased, so this is a real thrill for me. And the reason why I have such respect for what you do is you have a historically informed conversation of depth and detail.
Be sure to tune in to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings, 9 a.m. to 12 noon on your unapologetically progressive radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580. Is the pen mightier than the sword?
They say the pen is mightier than the sword. At KBLA Talk 1580, we not only have a lot to talk about, we have a lot to write about.
We are back, and you are listening and watching Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. And in this hour, I am joined by Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis. He is a civil rights leader and president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, which is the largest association of Black newspapers across this country. Thank you so much, Dr. Chavis, for joining me today. There is so much news going on. So much of it involves the status of Black folks in this country. I want to ask you about some of these big stories. Let's start with our VP, Kamala Harris. She has been getting some amazingly positive press over the last, I'd say 30, 60 days or so. You know, the press earlier on in the Biden-Harris administration tended to be pretty negative about the president. But more recently, she's getting lots of praise for pushing back on the GOP narrative around abortion rights, around Florida's incredibly backwards and, oppressive education standards about slavery. What do you think this turn of events is, or what do you attribute this turn of events to?
Well, it's a very positive turn of events for the Biden-Harris administration, but particularly for Vice President Kamala Harris. And let me just say, Reva, to you on the record, there has been an attack on Black women. The Vice President of the United States, Supreme Court Justice, the sister who is prosecuting this case in Georgia, that soon will be announced. And I hear around the subtleties, not only in Washington, D.C., but across the country. And so when Kamala sort of came out, I think it was very well timed. But the important note is the reception. She's been well received. She has thousands and thunderous applause in every venue that she's been on all the issues. And if President Biden was smart, he would keep Vice President Kamala Harris out there, because there's going to be a lot happening over the next 12 months preparing for the 2024 elections. One of the most key, one of the most consequential elections in our lifetime. I guess we say that every election is the most important. But in fact, it is. And Freddie Douglass had it right. Freedom is a constant struggle. It's just not something we do for 1 year and then we retreat and kind of watch our progress, salivate on it. No. When you win freedom, you got to continue to protect that freedom. You got to continue to sustain. So each generation should experience more and more freedom, not less and less freedom. And so that's why we have to be on guard with voting rights, with rights of productive rights of women, affirmative action. We got to make sure that they don't start revising Black history. And certainly we can't allow anyone to try to tamper with the narrative of the transatlantic slave trade.
Yeah, let's talk to your point about Kamala Harris, and you're saying that if Biden and his team, were smart, they would keep her out front. And yes, I am so happy to finally see the narrative changing and folks starting to give her the credit that she deserves, and the press starting to treat her with the respect as a Black woman, first Black woman vice president that she so righteously deserves. But there are some who say keeping her out front feeds the narrative of those Republicans that say, well, she's going to be the real president. And if you vote for Joe Biden independents or conservatives that have soured on Donald Trump, you're not really voting for Joe Biden, you're voting for Kamala Harris. And there are some independents, there are some conservatives, and maybe even some Democrats who are not ready for a Black woman to step into the top role. So does the Biden administration, you think, need to be concerned about that? And if so, how do they balance perhaps that concern with the popularity that the vice president has?
Your point is well taken, Areva. I think the Biden administration needs to keep pushing forward, keep Kamala Harris out there, because if you retreat, you can't show the far right that they have the effect to silence us, the effect to make us be restrained, the effect to make us stay in the middle and not raise our fists or raise our voices or raise our passion. One of the things that's so characteristic about Vice President Kamala Harris is her passion for justice, her passion for equality, her passion for speaking out. And I think that and overall, the Biden-Harris administration, particularly President Biden, he's accomplished a lot, but they haven't had the messaging of his accomplishments out there, in my view, proactive. You know, Donald Trump takes the oxygen out of the mainstream media every day, sometimes every hour. You know, and we should not just be reacting to the politics, not the politics, the politics of Donald Trump, because we all, you know, get in the line of reacting, then it serves as a distraction from some very real socioeconomic gains that need to be made in our communities.
And so, Dr. Chavis, as the head of the largest trade association of Black newspapers in this country, you have your fingers on the pulse of Black folks, no doubt about that. And so many of the articles that have been coming out about Black voters is that Black voters are pretty lukewarm on the Biden-Harris administration. Now, you know, these early comments, early polls, way too early to make any predictions. And if history tells us anything, is that Black folks are probably going to vote in large number for the Democratic Party. So
keep in mind, this projection of Black apathy, the predictions of Black low voter turnout, they've been around for over a decade. And they always, people are shocked, oh, wow, Black folks voted. What happened to the polls? So what happens is, the problem, Areva, is who does the polling. You know, I would love for the National Newspaper Publishers Association and Howard University and Black-owned media, we do our own polls because the polling presupposes the answers to the poll. If you look at even on CNN and MSNBC, who's supposed to be progressive, if you look at how they pose the question, you know, determines what answers you get. And I think that this notion, I've even heard now that, well, there's something going on between Black men and Black women. That Black women vote and Black men don't vote. And then all of a sudden, you know, in the barbershops or in the beauty parlors, we be taking on their narrative. And I said, oh, wait a minute. No, every person has to vote in our community, young and old, you know, no matter what your socioeconomic status. Voting for us is blood soaked. Voting for us is sacred. We died to get the right to vote. We bled to get the right to vote. So many people were lynched to get the right to vote. I'm so glad President Biden and Vice President Harris recognized Emmett Till and Emmett Till's family recently in the White House. So a lot of good things go on, but they're minimized in the mainstream media.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up because this article that I'm reading from is talking about Black voters in Atlanta. You know, the second largest Black population in the U.S. is in Atlanta. And they're saying 1 in 5 Black voters aren't enthusiastic about the Biden-Harris administration, citing the pain of inflation and setbacks on policies such as student loan forgiveness, saying that these policies have left Black folks with misgivings. So if these articles are disseminated, and we know they're regularly in the mainstream media, how do you make sure that the message you just delivered, that this doesn't reflect really how Black voters are thinking, because we don't have the right people even talking to Black voters? How do we push back against these articles and the targeting? Because we know whether it's Russia or conservative media outlets, Black voters are considered low propensity voters and are often targeted by disinformation campaigns.
That's right. You know, it's interesting. On the one hand, they say that our voting patterns are low, but on the other hand, hundreds of millions of dollars are spent on misinformation targeted toward the Black community to make sure that we underestimate our power, that we like the census. Well, now we know that millions of Black people were undercounted in the last census that the Trump administration was responsible for, and for setting it up for the undercount. And I think that the answer to the question is, I think we have to do our own polling. We have statisticians. We had some of the finest people in statistics and analysis. We just have to summon them to do our own polling. Just like your program that you do, we have to be in the media from our own position of understanding, from our own position of history, and from our own position of reality. I think that we need more real talk. Black radio one time was the drumbeat of the Black community. I mean, literally the drumbeat. But now, according to NABOB, the National Association of Black-owned radio owners, there's been a serious decline in the ownership of media by African Americans. Even though the demographics have changed, the browning of America demographically has taken place, but there has not been browning of wealth building. There has not been browning of ownership of media businesses in our community. So these are the things we have to continue to work on. And in the NMPA, I monitor what the 250 African American newspapers do every week, and Philadelphia Tribune is one of our publishers every day in Philly, and we have one in Brooklyn, the Daily Challenge, that publishes every day. But it is the narrative, the constant narrative has to be reinforced. I also would like to call for more alignment between the Black church, the Black press, HBCUs, the Divine Nine. We've got so many entities. Our challenge is how to work together. Mm-hmm. And to see Kamala Harris at the NAACP convention, I was in Boston. She made a great speech. It was well received. And I think that hopefully she will stay out there. And, people are criticizing her for being out there, but I think she should stay out there. She's going to get criticized whether she stay out or go or retreat. So it might as well stay out and keep fighting.
No, absolutely. First it was, where is she? What does she do? And then when she's showing up in these critical places, whether it's Iowa or Jacksonville, Florida, and taking on Republicans, then she's critiqued for that as well. But you brought up something really, really important, and that's the dying off of Black media, particularly Black radio. You said that was the drumbeat of our community. So it raises the question for me, like, where are African Americans getting their news? Because again, if you're reading most of the mainstream papers online, the mainstream outlets, you're going to hear that narrative that I just put forward, that Black folks are lukewarm and even maybe sour on the Biden-Harris administration. And you may not get that backstory about, who did the polling, who did they talk to, and if you did that polling with a Black firm and talked to Black people in a different part of the country, maybe you'd get different poll results. So where are Black folks getting their news if Black radio is dying, and what does that say about Black newspapers?
Well, it puts Black newspapers and other Black-owned media back on Front Street, because if there's a decline in Black-owned television, decline in Black-owned radio, and of course, we don't own any of the media platforms. Black people, we over-index on a whole lot of stuff. We over-index on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. We even over-index on TikTok, but we don't own those platforms. And so we know that there are not only foreign powers like Russia and others that hire bots and artificial intelligence to create these false, because I get emails sometime and impressions on my Facebook, and I know it's not from a Black person, but I can tell by the wording, and then I try to search, and sure enough, if somebody has one follower, so all these, and they put out this misinformation. And so my caution to our listeners, Areva, is that we should, like our grandparents used to say, we have to read between the lines. Well, you also have to hear between the lines. You have to see between the lines to seek that truth and keep pushing forward. And I think we need intergenerational. This year marks the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington, but also this year marks the 50th anniversary of hip hop. Mm-hmm. And I know a lot of the hip hop artists, I'm watching Beyonce on her tour, thousands of people are coming out. That's great to see the culture and influence of hip hop. But hip hop from the very beginning was always had a social consciousness. It always had to take the culture, to take the lyrics, to take the poetry, and the images that project standing up for freedom, justice, equality, and equity. We got to make sure that we hold on to that and not lose that. because it's not only what we say, but it's how we say it, and whether or not we say it with not just cultural sensitivity, but I would say culture being authentic to who we are as a people, not only in America, but in the world. And the world is changing. I think our struggles here in the United States are not isolated from our struggles in Africa or in Brazil or in Central America and other parts of the world. It's just a matter of not only connecting, but sharing information in a way that's very uplifting. I'm the eternal optimist, Areva. I can't wake up as a pessimist or go to sleep as a pessimist. You know, I think I'm always looking for that good news that Black people are achieving, that good news that Black people are still making a difference, not only in America, but throughout the world.
No, that's excellent to hear. And when we come forward, I want to talk more about, you made an excellent point about Black folks over-indexing on some of these social media platforms. And that begs the question about, what influence can the Black media have? Or are we reaching Black folks where they are? Tyler Perry just bought BET. Might that be a platform that gives way for Black folks to get news and information? And I also want to talk about what happened after George Floyd's murder, the protests, the activism, and now what we're seeing in terms of the pushback on everything from affirmative action to DEI. Does that tell us that all of that activism was more of a moment versus a movement? And of course, we're going to talk about the Biden's plan to ban menthol. So stay with us. KBLA Talk 1580. We have a lot to talk about. We will resume our conversation with civil rights leader, Dr. Ben Chavis, when we come forward.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at KBLA 1580.
Follow the leader.
Are you ready?
The station leading the way with exclusive interviews,
Follow the leader.
stimulating conversation, and intellectual discourse that empowers, enlightens, and informs.
Follow the leader.
Follow the leader at KBLA 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Keep following the leader.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rep spot.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
The bounce is back.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show, weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up. If you come across a radio frequency anywhere putting more variety and more diversity on the air than KBLA Talk 1580, we sure would like to hear about your discovery.
You got to have vision.
You can search, but we are confident that you won't find more shows covering more topics, hosted by a more diverse and inclusive lineup of talkers than the squad we have assembled here at KBLA Talk 1580.
This is the time, brothers. This is the time.
We've got something for everybody.
That's right.
Health and healing, history and humor, issues and events, empowerment and entertainment, all in one station.
What's really going on?
Free enterprise, you dig?
KBLA Talk 1580.
Yes.
Oh yeah. We got a lot to talk about.
King Kong ain't got on me.
If you're not listening to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings on KBLA Talk 1580, you're missing out. Everybody wants to talk to Tavis.
That's one reason, by the way, why I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. The three people I always most hoped would interview me were Phil Donahue, Studs Terkel, and Tavis Smiley. Donahue's retired, Terkel's deceased, so this is a real thrill for me. And the reason why I have such respect for what you do is you have a historically informed conversation of depth and detail.
Be sure to tune in to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings, 9 a.m. to 12 noon on your unapologetically progressive radio station, KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580.
Is the pen mightier than the sword?
They say the pen is mightier than the sword. At KBLA Talk 1580, we not only have a lot to talk about, we have a lot to write about. Politics, relationships, business, empowerment, and culture. The all-star roster at KBLA Talk 1580 has you covered.
That's what it's all about.
Be sure to follow us on all our socials for our latest book releases, op-eds, essays, and commentaries from our hosts. And, of course, download the KBLA 1580 app as we strive to remain your most trusted, credible, and reliable source for the issues you care about. This is unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
What up, baby?
I'm young, gifted, and black.
KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation and scholarships for the next generation of black journalists.
And I'm Haywood Galbraith, photojournalist and founder of the Minority Photojournalism Institute. Thanks, KBLA, for your generous $10,000 scholarship gift to help us train the next generation of black photojournalists.
Congratulations to all the students who will benefit from the scholarship dollars raised at our Black History Month luncheon, honoring black legends in LA media. When we come forward at KBLA Talk 1580, we're bringing everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us.
Connection established. Access granted.
In a survey conducted by the public opinion research firm Eviderus, KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerged as the station of choice for black audiences in the Los Angeles media market and beyond. The survey also revealed that the vast majority of black audiences are concerned about the lack of black-owned media and are more likely to listen to talk radio that focuses on issues that impact the black community. For some reason, the other talk stations haven't quite figured that out.
If you think about KFI, well, KFI only has like a 3% black listenership. 3%. So there's a good 97% out there to support a station like KBLA.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black. Your black. Your black.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at KBLA 1580.
Follow the leader.
Are you ready?
The station leading the way with exclusive interviews,
Follow the leader.
stimulating conversation, and intellectual discourse that empowers, enlightens, and informs.
Follow the leader.
Follow the leader at KBLA 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Keep following the leader.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
We are back, and in this hour, I'm joined by Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis. He's a civil rights leader and president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. So, Dr. Chavis, Tutau, one of the officers involved in the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis in May of 2020, was sentenced today. He received 4 years and 9 months for aiding and abetting. But rather than express remorse, he gave a 20-minute lecture basically to the court. The court had to interrupt him and let him know that he had expected for him to take more responsibility, to show some remorse and regret. And to the contrary, and I'm just wondering, does Tutau's sermon to the court as he's being sentenced for aiding and abetting a second-degree manslaughter, as well as the recent lawsuit filed by that conservative group, Alliance for Equal Rights, that's headed by Edward Blum, they've sued Fearless Fund. This is a Black investment firm, saying they're violating the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which bans racial bias in private contracts. Is all of this, you think, a reflection of the pendulum swinging in the opposite direction? We saw a lot of activism. We saw a lot of efforts on the part of individuals in this country to address systemic racism and barriers. We had this so-called racial reckoning. And now here we are a little over 3 years later, and you have a convicted, someone who's been convicted of manslaughter in the murder of George Floyd, lecturing the court rather than accepting responsibility. And we have a conservative group trying to challenge Black women who just want to help other Black women in business. What's going on?
Well, I think there's an overall resurgency of white supremacy. And I think the Black Lives Matter moment and the Black Lives Matter movement, which extended way beyond the borders of the United States, ultimately, put a lot of fear in people who don't want to see progressive change in America. But I would go back and say, Areva, that what happened to George Floyd was not isolated. It was part of a long series of racially motivated police brutality that has just been perpetrated time and time again on Black men, Black women, Black children, Black community, as well as other communities of color. And I think that what needs to happen is a consistency in our movement building. And we should not rest on winning particular battles, but not winning the war. And I think that, we have to be clear about what the movement is about. I was very fortunate in my younger years to work with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and I was youth coordinator for Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And I learned at the age of 14 what not just organizing and mobilizing is about, but toward a larger end. It's just not about one march. It's not just about one protest. It's not even in one case. It's about trying to create the conditions for systemic change. And as you know, as an officer of the court yourself, there's still very deep-seated institutional biases, prejudices, racism in the system. And I think that we be able to say in 2023, as we did in 1963 or as we did in 1953, what the nature of the systemic oppression may be or continues to be. It wafts into different manifestations. And I know you probably saw the fight that happened in Birmingham, not in Birmingham, Montgomery, on the dock.
On the dock, yes.
That was some deep-seated stuff. That wasn't just about one fist fight. That shows you that there's like a tinderbox that Donald Trump played into. What happened on January the 6th, that wasn't just one day thing. That had been simmering for a long time. And it may come back. I don't think people should underestimate far right-wing extremism.
Well, when you say come back, it seems to be very present. I wonder if this Tao would have said to 3 years ago, would he have made those statements 3 years ago that he made in court today? He said
would have been quiet, but he feels free to be vocal now.
Right. That's what he says. My conscience is clear. I will not be a Judas nor join a mob in self-preservation or betray my God. And we know white supremacists often cloak themselves in Christianity, cloak themselves in some kind of, religious, argument or shield. And his reference to a mob, obviously he's talking about the activists. He's talking about the folks that rose up and protested. So, the judge had to tell him he was really disappointed that he did not express any responsibility or take any accountability. So if we are confronted in this moment with this emboldened attitude that white supremacists and, folks like Tao that killed George Floyd, and this lawsuit is very troubling because this lawsuit is the beginning of this conservative group, Alliance for Equal Rights. This is the group that filed the lawsuit on behalf of Asian students, that took it all the way to the Supreme Court, that won the Supreme Court decision overturning affirmative action in college admissions. They now have their sights set on private businesses. They're saying, if you McDonald's, if you Microsoft, if you Anheuser-Busch, if you have a diversity, equity, and inclusion program, we are going to sue you and accuse you of violating civil rights. The Civil Rights Act in this instance is the Act of 1866. So how do we fight back?
Flipping the script, they're saying that the enslaved are now discriminating against the slave masters. It's interesting. They portray themselves as the victim. They want to ban books in Florida because teaching authentic and truthful history makes people uncomfortable, makes some people uncomfortable. Look what the state of Texas is doing, putting against international law, putting those sharp razor boys in the river, and people are dying from it. And yet, so I think there's an all-out onslaught, not just on civility, on fairness, but I think there's a steady march back to the right. And some of this is still in response to Obama being elected president. Keep in mind, Donald Trump came to power in wake of 8 years of President Obama. And when people say, well, why does Donald Trump have such a strong base? It's just not Trump. And while everybody gives him singular credit, it's deeper than Donald Trump. And this is about what portends to shape the future of America. We're going to push forward where we can have not only discussion about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but now there's a backlash, even having the discussion, even having the programs. And even Clarence Thomas now is talking about overturning Brown versus the board. So it doesn't stop. But to me, this is why we need to keep an ongoing activist-based movement alive, be very clear about what the goals and objectives are. And each generation, we should have to replenish ourselves with freedom fighters. We should have more freedom fighters in 2023 than we had in 1963. Or 1953.
Right.
And I think we should learn from our history, not necessarily repeat our history.
No, excellent point. And, so ironic about this lawsuit by Alliance for Equal Rights is they are relying on a civil rights statute that was enacted to prevent discrimination against slaves coming out of, after the Civil War. We're going through this period of Reconstruction. So these laws that were designed to allow Black folks to enter into contracts and not be discriminated against on the basis of their race, you now have this group claiming that a Black investment firm that has a grant program that targets Black women to help Black women entrepreneurs is violating a Civil Rights Act that, again, was enacted to address the rampant discrimination against Blacks coming out of slavery. So, yeah, things are upside down right now in this country, and we got to be woke.
Upside down for a while. And when Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, well, look what happened.
Yeah, hold that thought for me, Dr. Chavis. When we come forward, we're going to talk about that and want to get your take on this proposed ban of menthol in cigarettes by the Biden administration. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
If you're not listening to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings on KBLA Talk 1580, you're missing out. Everybody wants to talk to Tavis.
That's one reason, by the way, why I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. The three people I always most hoped would interview me were Phil Donahue, Studs Terkel, and Tavis Smiley. Donahue's retired, Terkel's deceased, so this is a real thrill for me. And the reason why I have such respect for what you do is you have a historically informed conversation of depth and detail.
Be sure to tune in to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings, 9 a.m. to 12 noon on your unapologetically progressive radio station, KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580.
Is the pen mightier than the sword?
They say the pen is mightier than the sword. At KBLA Talk 1580, we not only have a lot to talk about, we have a lot to write about. politics, relationships, business, empowerment, and culture. The all-star roster at KBLA Talk 1580 has you covered.
That's what it's all about.
Be sure to follow us on all our socials for our latest book releases, op-eds, essays, and commentaries from our hosts. And, of course, download the KBLA 1580 app as we strive to remain your most trusted, credible, and reliable source for the issues you care about. This is unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
What up, baby?
I'm young, gifted, and black.
KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation and scholarships for the next generation of black journalists.
And I'm Haywood Galbraith, photojournalist and founder of the Minority Photojournalism Institute. Thanks, KBLA, for your generous $10,000 scholarship gift to help us train the next generation of black photojournalists.
Congratulations to all the students who will benefit from the scholarship dollars raised at our Black History Month luncheon honoring black legends in LA media. When we come forward at KBLA Talk 1580, we're bringing everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us.
Connection established. Access granted.
In a survey conducted by the public opinion research firm Eviderus, KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerged as the station of choice for black audiences in the Los Angeles media market and beyond. The survey also revealed that the vast majority of black audiences are concerned about the lack of black-owned media and are more likely to listen to talk radio that focuses on issues that impact the black community. For some reason, the other talk stations haven't quite figured that out.
If you think about KFI, well, KFI only has like a 3% black listenership. 3%. So there's a good 97% out there to support a station like KBLA.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black. Your black. Your black.
To propose a ban on menthol cigarettes and flavored cigars. Now, some civil rights groups and black health organizations and consumer groups have pushed hard for the ban, viewing it as a major racial justice issue. They allege that the tobacco industry has unfairly targeted the black community through discounts on menthol products and advertising in stores in black neighborhoods. And there are some studies that show that black smokers use menthol cigarettes at a much higher rate than white smokers. But not all black leaders are in agreement. Some black leaders are weary of such a ban. They argue that it singles out black smokers and puts them at risk of more confrontations with the police. Members of the Congressional Black Caucus have spoken out against the ban in the past, though opposition seemingly has decreased over the last few years. And even Al Sharpton, a civil rights activist, has urged the administration to establish a commission to study the racial and criminal justice impact of a menthol ban. Dr. Chavis, what's your position on the proposed FDA ban on menthol cigarettes?
Thank you very much. The National Newspaper Publishers Association, we oppose the menthol ban. We think it's going to have a negative consequence on our community. It really amounts to racial profiling. You know, why would the FDA make a proposal to ban menthol cigarettes only? Menthol is not addictive. Nicotine is addictive. So why they're not banning Camels or Marlboros? Because persons of color don't prefer those brands. So why would you then put a ban out? And the enforcement of the ban, that's why the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, the National Association of Black Police Officers, we work very closely with a lot of blacks in law enforcement who have also articulated their opposition to the proposed menthol ban. I think Reverend Sharpton is right. Before the government makes these rules or regulations, they should do a study to see what is the racial impact. You know, now some proponents of the bill say, well, don't worry, law enforcement won't enforce this, it'll just be the health officers. How many city has health officers? If people are caught and when the ban is enforced, selling or using these menthol cigarettes is going to cause an underground market. And what's going to happen, we have young people out there slinging cigarettes like they sling other things that may be banned or illegal. And it's going to bring law enforcement.
Yeah, I hear your arguments, but the Black community is very divided on this. The NAACP has come out in favor of the ban. A lot of Black health organizations and consumer groups, the American Cancer Association and others. I'm not sure. This is a conundrum.
You're right, we're divided. But when we're divided, what should bring us together? Let's dig deeper on the issue. Let's do some research. Let's get why would those who are even in favor of the ban, why would they oppose doing a study of the racial impact of it?
Well, they would tell you, and I've interviewed some of those on my show, they would tell you the studies have already been done and the data is there, the stats are there, and the evidence is there that these menthol cigarettes are incredibly dangerous to African Americans and leads to higher rates of certain kinds of cancers and illnesses associated with smoking. So I don't think they would agree with you that there needs to be more studying of the issue done. In fact, what they say is that it's taking way too long because the evidence has been there for many, many years, and the FDA is just catching up with something, a ban that is going to significantly increase the health outcomes for Black folks. And then, I'm sure you've heard these arguments, but some of the folks that I've interviewed have also said they are questioning the opposition. And obviously this is not targeted at you, but some of them say that they believe some who are opposing it are in bed with the big tobacco companies and perhaps are getting kickbacks or perks or money or something for their position. I just don't know where the Biden administration, they don't appear to be backing up. Are you sensing that they are going to take Reverend Sharpton up on his proposal of more studying, or what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think they're going to do what they think would bring people together and not divide people. And I think that while there's serious opposition and there's serious promotion for the menthol ban, and where I come in is the consequences. I think that we've had some people to lose their lives in our community when police overreact to their involvement with cigarettes. And I think some of the mothers who have lost their children as a result of the interaction with law enforcement. When you say these studies have been done, that Black law enforcement has said no one from the FDA ever asked them what the consequences. And so, yeah, there may have been some studies, but those studies were not comprehensive. They were not thorough, because the Black community itself is not, as you know, is not monolithic.
No. And you mentioned, let me say this, you mentioned those mothers. I've had some mothers who lost their sons to police violence who are also very much in favor of the ban. So you're right, we are not monolithic. And on this issue in particular, we seem to be particularly divided. Law enforcement, civil rights organizations, consumer groups, mothers and citizens. This is going to be a tough one for the Biden administration. It's going to be interesting to see how they move forward. All the reports I see.
It's my understanding, even after the rule is promulgated, it still is going to take 3 or 4 years before it's actually implemented. So I think there's still room for studies. There's still room for people who say they don't want any more studies. I find that very interesting. To me, it's just like, I remember when we started dealing with environmental matters, there was opposition because people didn't believe that environmental issues were a civil rights issue. And we're now over that. Now we have a growing environmental justice movement. But it took a while for people to cognitively relate these issues beyond the health issues. I agree. We should do everything to protect the health of our community. But health is also impacted by disproportionate and sometimes fatal interaction unnecessarily with police forces that are hostile to our community.
Yeah, so we got that, obviously law enforcement should play a role and their voices should be heard. So you got the Black doctors and health organizations saying this is the way to proceed, and law enforcement, having some different thoughts about it. We're going to watch this, obviously. So there's no right or wrong answer. Obviously, the Black community has a right to have different opinions about various issues, and this being one of them.
When there's a right and a wrong and a serious division, we can have a win-win just by getting more factual information. We need to have more discussion, more debate, and more resolve. I think this is something that's vital as we go forward, that we don't become polarized, where we see the other side as the enemy rather than brothers and sisters with a different point of view. And I think it's sometimes, and I'm glad you're raising on your this program, Areva, we need more discussion as we move forward.
We need more discussion, and we definitely need this issue raised in more forums, because I'm not so certain that enough Black folks are even tuned in to this proposed change by the FDA. Obviously, the pundits, the experts are debating it, the national organizations that have their activists and their lobbyists and their policy advisors. But I want to see folks, just everyday people who may smoke or may have family members that smoke. I'd love to see them weigh in on this as well. Well, we are out of time, Dr. Chavis. Thank you so much for all the work you do with the National Newspaper Publishers Association. The Black press is so, so important, particularly in moments like these, in moments where our entire democracy is being threatened and anti-Black sentiments are reigning high, are pervasive throughout our culture. It is so important that folks are getting information, are getting it accurate, and they're getting it from trusted sources. And the National Newspaper Publishers Association is one of those trusted sources, and your 250 Black newspapers around this country. So again, thank you for the work that you do. The next voice that you hear will be Robin Ayers and the Raw Report right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show, weekdays from 2 to 4, only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up.